We cannot take direction from the audience at this time, I believe, unless members of committee would like to. Yeah, they want to speak. It's coming up where you've got 5 minutes, right? So you can come at that time. In fact, I'll start that right now, which is what I did earlier. Request to address items on the agenda. There's 1 hour to be allocated, 5 minutes to address some specific item you have that is related directly to the Administration, Finance, Fire Committee agenda. So members of the gallery, if you wish to speak at that time, you can right now. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward and give your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name's Joan Cott, and I'm sure the Cott name's been batted around in the newspaper and the neighborhood quite frequently lately. We've lived on North Chippewa Road for over 40 years, and at the time we bought the property, we had a road in front of us. That was a direct connection to the Casterville Road and the Abington Road. And although over the years the road, I have to say, has always been kept in less than stellar condition, we've managed. About 6 years ago, when we first heard some rumblings about the bridge, my time frame could be out. I'm now a retired principal, so you kind of forget all those things. But at the time, I sent a letter to council, probably addressed it to the roads department, requesting that if any further action be taken on the bridge or any concerns that we be informed in writing as a community. That never happened. I never got a phone call. I never got a response. Kept an eye on it. And then, of course, those lovely barriers went up last year, and a number of car accidents took place. And I was, unfortunately, had an opportunity to view a rather serious one. And we immediately phoned council and requested signage to warn people. And as historically, like I said, we've lived on a road that was a drive-through. And I am saddened to say the closure of the bridge has greatly impacted all of us. We always went toward the Hamilton Way. I care for my father, my uncle, and in fact, they've gotten lost twice on the way out to my place because of the bridge closure. However, I can't see the point of closing it. To me, council needs to implement a long-term plan in regard to repairing the bridge. We own property in Halliburton, and if they can build a bridge for $850,000 that serves a rather large summer community up there, I really can't see why West Lincoln can do something similar. I know money's an issue. I know that if there were a long-range plan, say 5 years, keep it closed for 5 years while we somehow come up with a way to implement a new bridge, improved infrastructure, whatever that's needed for this road to stay open. I think that has to be the answer. There has to be more problem solving going on. I think it's a total waste of money to even entertain the idea of a footbridge, a walk-through. We need the drive-through. Greatly impacts people with agricultural equipment. As it stands now, with the road closed, you need to have a turnaround. The school bus turns around in our driveway. Is that safe? No. People who get down to the end of the road and are on the east side are turning around in the former Bergman's house driveway. The barriers are up. I don't know, I've never seen how the grader turns around or the snow plow. But there are issues there. And I know the road allowance, I believe, is 43 feet, and it was gifted to the township through the farmers that owned that property many, many years ago. And to me, the cost of expropriation for a turnaround, I have no idea. I haven't researched that, but it would have to be done at both ends. And to me, that would be money wasted. Please, please, please consider some way we can keep this bridge open. even if it's a temporary closure for a few years, while we examine grants, see what the province can do to help support. But that bridge needs to be opened. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, you're welcome to come. I believe you're Michael.
Good evening, Council. I'm the other half of the Cott family. My name is Michael Cott. Our family's been around the area about 40 years, and I'm an active farmer, also gainfully full-time employed by Dofasco in Hamilton. I want to thank the Council first, the Recreation Committee, just on completion of the new rec center. My son plays hockey for West Lincoln minor hockey, and we were there for the skills competition on Monday, and had a great time, great family event. So you guys should congratulate yourselves. We very much appreciate the effort that went into building that arena, and it's fabulous. Anyways, that aside, I want to keep this as brief as possible, and I want everybody knows about the article that was submitted to the Niagara This Week by now. So I'm going to read you the email that was sent to one of the reporters, just so you know how this got kind of started. And this article, keep in mind, was in response to the initial article that was somewhat biased to the council and the Public Works Department. Hello, Beth. We appreciate your article submission regarding Bridge 34. However, we are concerned that this article is somewhat biased towards the Township Public Works Department in relation to budget concerns the council may have. We are residents located in the middle section impacted and extremely concerned about the future impacts of the bridge closure. Our perspective is based on the fact that we have a 40-year family history on the street with 3 generations. We are active farmers trying to grow an operation. The township has failed miserably at addressing the real costs of not replacing the bridge. Those costs, from our opinion, are as follows. Number 1, restricted movement and alteration of daily normal life. The bridge closure restricts independent access of our children's use of the Caisterville Public Library and restricts travel to the Caisterville Church by adding 3.2 kilometers a trip. Restricts access to the local businesses such as the Caisterville Golf Course and Gun Club, and affects all in both directions, not just people on our street, but everyone in the whole surrounding area. Restricts access to the closest gas station, being Empire's Corners, by adding 3.2 kilometers per trip. The bridge will also increase the annual kilometers to our vehicles by over 3,200 kilometers a year, or sorry, 2,300 kilometers a year, not including my personal rerouted ag traffic, which has impacted our operation by an estimated $280 in fuel and transportation costs this in 2018 alone, not including time, obviously. Number 2, reduced availability of emergency services. While we agree with the fire chief that it does not impede access from the local fire station, it does, however, reduce directional time advantage for EMS. Ambulance and could affect police coverage. No, please no, we are speaking as parents of a child with a life-threatening peanut allergy. Number 3, reduce property values. Regarding probably the most costly issue addressing every resident, will be difficult. However, even if you use a modest 8% reduction in property tax values for obvious reasons, we can make a basic assumption that there's about $10 million in taxable property assets on our street, with many of those assets being reassessed over the past 5 years. The township has been forced residents to take a loss of an estimated $800,000. Many of the residents have either done new builds, which have been taxed at the newer MPEC rates, or built structures. Our family farm being one of them, putting up a 4,000 square foot equipment shed over the past 2 years, with plans to build a small mid-sized cattle barn this year, which is currently on hold because of this hoorah. Anyways, the expectation under the current tax structure is that the bridge is and will be fully functional. For certain, all property owners on North Chippewa had a reasonable expectation that it would always be a through road. It'd be silly to consider otherwise. And number 4, finally, discrimination. Township has taken a discriminatory approach by neglecting the most vulnerable people in our community, being the children and the elderly, by restricting movement. The closure also limits our farm business and our families' ability to grow into a functioning, contributing part of the community. Our family's view is that the township is being very short-sighted and not looked at the bigger picture. Township manager and Public Works Department has one objective, which is to stay within budget and not rebuild or take care of the voting public. And their opinion would be the same for all bridges, because it simply won't fit the budget. The bridge affects many aspects of the residents' life, but unrestricted road access is a piece of our history which needs to remain. Thank you. Saying that, that's about all I can say right now. I'm a numbers guy by trade. I negotiate numbers for a living. I'm also a numbers guy with my farm. And I've done a lot of estimations on, rebuild costs, but to reaffirm the conversation that the prior speaker had about the cost of a turnaround, the cost of expropriation, both directions. You're not talking one, little road project here. You're talking both. If you ever talked about a turnaround, you're talking well over $1 million. It would be silly to consider with expropriation, the cost of construction, and then if you threw in a footbridge. I appreciate your recommendation, William, but I just don't believe that's the solution. The bridge to me is an integral part of my farming operation, not just because of the properties that we farm, but just for everyday traffic for suppliers and and contacts and whatnot. So it makes things very difficult from my aspect. Anyways, that's about all I have to say, and thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Could we have a copy of your speech for our records?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. You have a copy of it, actually.
The email you sent?
Yeah.
It's the exact same.
Yeah, it's exactly.
He's already got it. That's fine then. Thank you, Michael. Anybody else in the audience? Okay, thank you very much. Next month will be budget time, and bridges are part of capital, so I'm sure there'll be some discussion at that time. Consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be routine and non-controversial and can be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be removed from the consent resolution and considered immediately following adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. Item A 11-11, 1, West Lincoln Age Friendly Advisory Committee, WLAFAC, minutes of January 18, 2019. 2, Information Report WLFD-04-19, monthly update, January 2019. 3, Recommendation Report RFD-C-01-2019, application for refreshment cart license, spelt American, should have a C, and lease portion of CIBC parking lot, Ken Brutusani, Dog Got It, Hot Dog Cart. 4, Recommendation Report RFD-C-03, 2019 summer and December meeting schedule. And 5, Recommendation Report RFD-C-04-19, pregnancy and parental leave policy, members of council. Recommendation, the Administration, Finance, Fire Committee hereby approve the following consent agenda items. 1, items 1 and 2 and are hereby received for information, and items 3, 4, and 5 being hereby received and the recommendations contained therein are adopted with the exceptions of any items from members of committee. Is there anyone that wishes to pull an item? Seeing none, then I need a mover and a seconder, please. Mayor Bilsma and Councillor Ganand. Any further questions from members of committee with regards to all these items? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Communication, item A-12-19, George and Tina Kuhlman, a request for signage and roundabout at the intersection of West Street, Station Street, and St. Catherine Street. Recommendation that the correspondence from George and Tina Kuhlman dated January the 24th, 2019, requesting a sign on the east side of St. Catherine Street, south of the intersection for northbound traffic stating "Do a good turn" signal be installed as a temporary measure until a roundabout or stoplight at the intersection of West Street, Station Street, and St. Catherine Street can be installed, be received and forwarded to the Niagara Regional Public Works Department for consideration. Do I have a mover and seconder on this, please? Councillor Bilsma and Councillor Yunker. Any questions from members of committee with regards to this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of this? That is carried. Thank you. Staff report, item A 13-19, Treasurer and Director of Finance, Ms. Donna DePolipis. Recommendation report, RFD-T-09-19, 2019 corporate sponsorships and cemetery hall board grants. Recommendation 1, that report RFD-T-03-19 regarding the 2019 corporate sponsorship and cemetery and hall board grants dated February 19, 2019 be received, and that the corporate sponsorship and the cemetery and hall boards grants for 2019 as recommended in this report be approved. Do I have a mover and seconder for this, please? Councillor Cody and Mayor Bilsma, any questions from members of committee on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item A 14-19, Clerk Joanne, I was calling Joe. Shimmy, recommendation report RFD-C-02-19, school crossing guard study various locations. Recommendation 1, that report RFD-C-02-2019, school crossing guard study various locations dated February 19, 2019 be received, and that the school crossing guard study various locations as prepared by the Associated Engineering dated October 2018 attached to Schedule A to this report be received, and that the recommendation contained therein be adopted as follows. Number 1, install a stop ahead sign on Oak Boulevard facing southbound traffic just south of Forest View Court. And 2, install a second stop sign on the left-hand side, northeast corner of Oakdale Boulevard facing southbound at its intersection with Golden Acres Drive. And 3, that a letter be forwarded to the Niagara Region requesting that the urbanization of the north side of Regional Road 14 from Canberra Street to Wade Road to allow for the construction of a sidewalk on the north side to address students who are currently using the shoulder of the road to walk to and from school. And 3, that the Township of West Lincoln advise Kim Van Ravensay that the principal of Smithfield Public School Niagara Student Transportation Services are the results of Associated Engineering study, which concluded that none of the 3 locations, being 1, Oakdale Boulevard and Golden Acres Drive, and 2, Oakdale Boulevard and Georgia Cactus Drive, and or 3, Town Line Road and or Canberra Road, warrant the need for a crossing guard. Need a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Trombetta and Councillor Cody. Any questions from members of committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Other business. Item A15-19, CAO. Ms. Beverly Hendry, Reemployment Professional Accomplishments. Number 1, Elsie Curry, Deputy Clerk, AMCTO, Municipal Administration Program, Unit 2, and John Levens, Deputy Treasurer, AMCTO, Municipal Accounting and Finance Program, MAFT-Unit 2. Ms. Hendry, you wish to comment on this, please?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. So, as you mentioned, our Deputy Clerk, Elsa Curry, has taken her MAP accreditation to the next level. She just finished Unit 2, and that's the AMCTO Municipal Administration Program is quite a comprehensive overview of municipal administration. So it's keeping our staff into a good place, especially for her role as Deputy Clerk. And our Deputy Treasurer, John Levens, has as well done the next step of the AMCTO Municipal Accounting and Finance Program and finished up Unit 2. And again, continue to support him in his role as the Deputy Treasurer. And again, it's good for all staff to be recognized for the work that they do with their own professional development.
Thank you. Any questions from members of committee? Very good. Item A16-19, members of committee, verbal updates from members of boards and committees if required. Are there any? Councilor Gannon.
Thank you. I just thought this was a good opportunity. I know that the social media has been full of information about our West Lincoln Memorial Hospital and what's happening with the closure on the weekends. Just so that people are aware that the Community Advisory, the Hospital Community Advisory Committee, is staying on top of this. And there was a huge briefing note that came out talking about all the kinds of things they're trying to do to encourage nurses to apply for positions in the OR. And the latest memo just said that there have been some viable applicants in recent days and that they'll be updating us on further progress. So I just thought that if people in the community happen to ask you what's going on with that, that all members of council should be aware that they are working on trying to get that. And we've had some encouragement from some other people. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor?
Thank you, Mrs. Gannon. Actually, I don't know if I can ask you this, but I have so when you mentioned there that you've heard that they have some viable candidates, I heard something that said that anybody who applies, there's no guarantee that those candidates would go to West Lincoln. Would you know anything about that particular, like there was, what I understood, if I understood correctly, is that there was concern that you can apply and then because of, HHS being so, I guess, hard up for nurses in general, they could send those nurses anywhere and leave West Lincoln kind of high and dry. So I don't know how much of that you could actually.
Yeah, I can't speak to that particularly, except for there is a protocol.
There is,
And they
okay.
certainly are looking for nurses at all levels throughout all of the Hamilton Health Sciences,
Yes.
but with a mind to the fact that West Lincoln has particular needs. So,
Okay.
so the person who sent the update that I received was speaking specifically about West Lincoln. So
Oh,
hopefully
excellent.
that's a good sign, but
Okay.
nothing definite yet.
Yes, and just to mention what I think what you're mentioning there is, I went online there myself, and I'm trying to encourage all of my entrepreneurial friends and colleagues to kind of join the fight and kind of contribute where they can to help make West Lincoln more attractive to people who may be outside the area, and whether they're coming from a different province, a different country, or even within our own country and our own province, to welcome them with their arms open with incentives. I realize. My memory's correct. There's, like a $30,000 signing bonus if you come from outside the province, but I don't think Hamilton Health Sciences is doing enough to encourage people who live already within our community or just outside of our community. So I, myself as an entrepreneur, wants to help kind of start a movement there. And if I understand, they're already trying to work on something. So I was kind of, my idea wasn't necessarily original, but I kind of had the same idea as somebody else, and hopefully people out there who hear this or get wind of it can kind of do the same. I offered, 5 free family portrait sessions to any nurses who happen to get hired by West Lincoln Memorial Hospital, and that they can kind of help get acquainted with the community. And I hope that other people with other services and skill sets can do the same, so we can make this signing bonus maybe into the, have the appeal of being, worth $50,000+, whether you're inside or out. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else at this time? Okay, that completes A 16-19. I need to step down right now, and Co-Chairman Councillor Cody, take my place with regards to item A 17-19 and new business. I have some things I need to say. Thank you.
All right, so we are doing other business, item A 17-19, members of the committee, RE, other business items of an informative nature. Do we have any? Councillor Reiner.
Thank you. This is something I wanted to bring up. Next month, March the 14th, March the 4th, I believe, there's a special council meeting with regards to budgeting. And at that time, I would like to bring up the subject with regards to remuneration for councillors. It's been a long time since this has happened, and there has been some changes from our illustrious leader in Ottawa that has affected us already with less pay, and it needs to be addressed in the interest of fairness. So I would like to bring that up next month, and with regards to informative nature, I'd let council know that I'm going to have a little presentation next month, and it's for them to evaluate at that time.
Is there anything from anyone else? Not seeing anything. Moving on to 10, new business. A note that only items required immediate attention, direction, and must first approve a motion. Okay. So does anybody have any new business? Councillor Reiner.
Thank you, Councillor Cody. I wish to move forward with a new item of business, moved by myself and second by Councillor Harold Jonker, that a new item of business be introduced, being an amendment to the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw. I need committee's endorsement to proceed.
Yeah, Councilor Troy.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Okay.
I just asked for the vote.
Oh, okay, all those in favor?
Thank you. What I'd like to bring up is with regards to the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw. New councilors here haven't experienced this yet, but we have something called the property standards, in which case what it really means is that we have a standard that we have in the township with regards to how a property is to be looked after and what is acceptable for the person and for the people around it. And last time it was updated, it was in 2011. And we have different situations that happen in the country. We have a bylaw right now that enforces mostly the residential part of the township in the country. But we also have large farm operations, we have commercial, we have industrial. And they're all part of the mix. And I believe it's important that we have consistency and fairness throughout. We've had situations where individuals have stored a lot of vehicles on their property, and the bylaw removes it. We've had other situations where on residential there has been a lot of a mess, and it's allowed it to be cleaned. In discussion with Brian Treble, there is a lot of things in it that has not been tied up. And in 2011, when this was introduced, it was on a broad spectrum, and it didn't realize that there are other situations that could require agriculture or commercial or whatever, that it's important no matter where you live in the country that you respect the individual's property around. And basically at least in my opinion, there is no excuse for somebody not being neat. Regardless of what you have, regardless of what you do, there's no excuse for not making your property look respectable. This can only be activated by a written complaint. But in speaking to Mr. Treble, he also agrees that there are things in it that could be tightened up in fairness to everybody who lives in the country. So if somebody lives on a 1-acre property and stuff, and he's supposed to keep his property clean, well, somebody that's on a larger acreage should also have the same responsibility to keep it clean. It's the fairness so that everybody has the right to the enjoyment of their facilities and the right to the enjoyment of their property around them. Mr. Treble called me about an hour before this because I had this put together in discussions with our clerk this morning, and he thanked me for putting it in the way I did. He had no problem with it, and he said should committee endorse it, he would have no trouble in putting something together with a report in April in order to give him time to go through it. In discussions with our bylaw officer, Jeff, he also felt that he worked in other townships where it was tighter, where it was more fair to everybody, and that kind of information together that he brings aboard together with Mr. Treble, I think will work to the benefit. This is just to make everything on an equal basis so that everybody has the right to enjoy their property out there and other people have the right to respect everybody's property, and it's consistent across the board. So I think it's just something that we need to tighten up. It's been 8 years since it's been done. So a review of the situation wouldn't be bad. Mr. Treble is prepared to look at other townships and other bylaws and the fact of the experience that we have in our existing bylaw officer and be able to improve it so that it's to the benefit of everybody no matter what your occupation is or what you do so long as you live in the country. So this is what I wanted to bring forward. It's just an authorization for our Director of Planning to put together a report and present it to the Planning Committee in early April.
Okay. Mayor Bilson?
So, just, I can appreciate the sentiment. I know sometimes it's a little bit, like, I guess I'm concerned about tightening. I know, I hear what Councilor Rayner's putting forward. I'd like to offer kind of the counter argument that basically, you know, there's always a challenge that we face where we have neighbors who think that their property is bigger than the edge of their property. And, you know, there are mechanisms that are available currently in our bylaws that you know, assist neighbors getting along. They've been working for a number of years. I think that there's, so I think that those measures are sufficient. I don't think that they're onerous. I tend to resist any movement in the direction of tighter legislation, simply because I think people have certain latitude on their own property to, and not treat it like a junk heap, but because of course our bylaws would prevent that from happening, but allow for, they're subject to some interpretation of what neat is or what's acceptable. You know, they have to cut their lawn. They can't, you know, shipping containers got regulated a number of years ago. We can't bring in loads of fill. So we have bylaws in place. I tend to resist the idea that governments tend to creep, this idea that they become more and more restrictive. And I'm sympathetic to property owners that, you know, I tend to keep my property very, very neat. I can't see my neighbors. It was very important for me to have a measure of privacy and the like, so I searched out and took several years to find a property that fit what I like to see in a property. And I love my neighbors, but I also love the trees that are between me and my neighbors, and it allows me, affords me the privacy and those kind of things as well. And I can also be very sympathetic to neighbors who have loud neighbors and messy neighbors. I do have one of those as well, and you know, as long as it stops by 11 o'clock, which is what our bylaw states. I know that sometimes my kids are noisy and screaming, you know, in play, screaming nonetheless, and so we all have to live together. So I can appreciate the sentiment. I find the bylaws acceptable. I don't get a lot of complaints that of that nature come across my desk. I do get complaints that our current bylaw structure tends to be more restrictive, and so I would be in favor of loosening bylaws rather than tightening them, just as a matter of principle. Thank you.
Councilor Ryder?
Yes, Mayor Billsman mentioned that there's something that in the bylaws that can stop junk being piled up. Well, according to our bylaw officer, there isn't anything. So we don't have anything that can stop somebody from making an absolute mess of their property, and we can't do anything about it. So the idea is that everybody has the right to the enjoyment of their property, and if you look after your property and the individual next door just fills it full of junk to the point where it's unsightly, it degrades, it depreciates at your place, and it doesn't make you want to look after your own property, then obviously there is a lapse in the bylaw that can effectively say to somebody that, you know, if you live out in the country, there's a reasonable expectation that you should be relatively neat. And our bylaw is very loose that way. Our bylaw officer has acknowledged that it is very weak, and it does need, it's not tightening, it's equaling and saying, as the mayor said, his property is neat, you go by my property, it's very neat. Most people in the country are neat, but there's always, that's why we have laws for speeding and laws for crime, because there's always somebody that does something different. Well, in this particular situation, there's always people out there who don't care, and they make their place look like a scrapyard. And in those particular cases, people who live around there and not to their own doing shouldn't have to put up with it. And there should be some reasonable expectation from the town, which they do on some of the bylaws, that they can clean up. But it is very loose at this time, and it doesn't protect the best interests of those people who take pride in their property. And I think the incentive should be that you take pride in your property will allow other people to do the same thing. I mean, you could take it one step further and say that impact, for example, if you let your barn deteriorate to nothing and it falls down and it looks like a shabby mess, you don't have any increase in your taxes. You fix your barn up and make it look nice and your taxes are increased, so you're penalized for fixing it up. But in this particular situation, I'm just talking about just general appearance and enjoyment of your property and the properties that are around, and to look at things which have been done in other townships that say, no, there's a certain standard that people should have if they live in the country out of respect for their neighbors, and that's all I'm asking from this. And we don't know what Mr. Trouble would bring back, but he does not have a problem with investigating it. And our bylaw officer said that there are certainly other townships who have things that they do to increase the appearance of their neighborhoods that could be utilized in ours if we investigate it. And all I'm asking for is the investigation.
Councilor Trombetta?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Councilor Rayner is correct in what he's saying, that our building or bylaw officer says it's kind of loose, if that's what you're stating, I don't have an issue of them coming to present where it's too loose or too tight. Maybe they should come and just give us a briefing. Maybe there's things in there that are too tight that we can loosen up, and maybe there's other things that we have to tighten up. And if they decide, if Brian and Jeff come in and say that we need to tighten up some certain areas, but we should loosen up some other areas because it doesn't apply, I don't have an issue with that. I think, what, if they're stating that to Councilor Rayner, that, like I said, if Jeff is stating that it needs to be tightened up, maybe they should come and tell us what needs to be done. Because to be honest with you, all the stuff that's in the bylaw, I have no idea. And what stuff that needs to be tightened up, that needs to be. I don't have a problem if Brian and Jeff put something together to come brief council on what needs to be fixed. But until that, then we can go from there. But if they don't tell us, I don't know. So,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Gannon?
Thank you. I have read the property standards stuff lately because, of course, I've been assigned that task. I don't have a problem with looking at bylaws again. I'm really concerned about increasing what we're looking at. I obviously live in town and not on a farm, but I taught in both Gainsborough and Caister for a long time. So I've driven all of those roads, and I know there are a lot of farmers who store old equipment, and lots of times they're down a hedgerow or they're on the edge of their property or whatever. I would hate for farmers to feel like somebody's watching their every movement every time they have an old piece of machinery that needs to be put somewhere. So I think we'll have to be really, really careful if we do look at this, that we are not imposing, as Mayor Bylsma has said, more rules upon people and what they can and can't do on their property. I think there has to be a common sense element and tightening the rules. What we have right now are bylaws that are driven by complaints. And so it would be very easy if a bylaw such as Councilor Rayner is suggesting was put in place for neighbor upon neighbor to be pit against each other because of these complaints. And if a complaint is put in writing or verbally, then it needs to be inspected and it needs to be, enforced. And I just see this snowballing. I think it's fine for our building inspector to say, oh, yes, there's nothing really there and we can tighten up. But that means tightening up that inspection process as well, which means perhaps extra staffing. I mean, I think the whole thing can snowball. I think we have to be really, really careful about what we do with those bylaws and what people can and can't do with their property, whether you're talking in town or in the country. But the country lends itself to bigger more equipment, more stuff sort of around and about just by the very nature of the farming community. And I just think we can put ourselves in a big mess if we're not really careful. But I'm sure that we'll come back with some kind of report that will give us something to pick up. Thank
Sure.
you.
Councilor Reiner, you wanted to respond, and
Yeah,
then
it's
Councilor
just that
Trombetta.
Mr. Trouble will be looking at other townships who already have one that exists and looking at the potential of utilizing some of them. So it's based on past history too. I'm not trying to put one against the other. What I'm just saying is it would be nice to have something, and I understand what you're saying, there are farmers that put them up against the fence, but that's not the situation. It's the ones who just clutter them everywhere and just leave parts there, parts here, and parts there. And it's like you on your lawn, just half cutting your grass, leaving your lawnmower out there and all. I mean, it's just a general neatness that people out in the country expect if they're living next door, that the person next door is going to be relatively the same. And since those bylaws already exist, I'm not asking to create something new. I'm asking something that he will investigate that's already been used and proven in other townships that would assist us and doing a better job in what we're doing, but not necessarily making it worse, just making it more fair and making it even to everybody out there. And that's all I'm asking. And Brian will present that as such, and then it's up to committee to evaluate it at that time. And I'm just asking for him to have an opportunity to do something, and then let committee evaluate it on his presentation.
Councilor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not against, by any means, I guess, tightening up the bylaws there. My only concern at this point would be like our bylaw officers, how few we have in our bylaw program. Like, it's tiny. And so tightening up these, rules and regulations and bylaws, I feel like that's, something that if we're going to be serious about that, then we need to look at that in a bigger picture of how we're going to invest into that so that they can do what they do with what they're already doing, and, and how limited they are to do it currently, if that makes any sense at all. And so I wouldn't be against, as mentioned, having that presentation presented to us. But at the same time, I think if we're going to be serious about that, then we also have to be serious about the conversation of what it looks like to invest into more staff. As we know, like our community, each staff member wears about 15 hats and some. So if we're going to bring on tighten up the rules with bylaw, then we got to be willing to invest into it so that we can make it run more efficiently. Thank you.
Councilor Trombetta?
Just want to reiterate what I said. If staff has let a councillor know that that some tightening needs to be done, we take recommendation from staff as council. So if staff decides to bring us something that we need to tighten up, we'll do it. But until we hear something, then again, we can't move forward on it. But again, staff would have to let us know. So like I said, if our bylaw officer said that there's some loose areas, bring them forward to tell us, obviously, if that's what Councillor Rayner is saying. But until that, I as council, I can't do nothing until we know where the areas are. So thank you.
Councilor Rayner?
Yes, Jeff has also brought up the fact that he recognizes the weaknesses, has been up there. You got to remember that this is only on a submission. You have to have a written submission of a complaint. And on this, he's saying that the bylaw, and they don't spend a lot of time on it because they don't get a lot of complaints. But when he does, he realizes that the bylaw does not give him, in many cases, the ammunition that he needs in order to rectify the problem, although he recognizes the problem and has in the past, with other places he's worked, has had one that was effective towards that. And he was more than willing to do this. But I went through Brian with Jeff's recommendation that I know what I need to do, and working with Brian to say, this is what we've done in the past, give me an opportunity, and I'm sure we can rectify these problems because I've dealt with them in the past and have been very successful, but the bylaws in this township are not the same. We need to improve them, and that's why I've come.
Okay, I echo Councilor Trombetta. I'd like to hear from staff. My concern is you keep using this term, general neatness. And to hold someone with 100 acres to the same general neatness requirements of someone with 2 acres, I think is unreasonable. I think that when you move to the country, you move there with certain expectations, and one of them is that not everybody's going to have a manicured, neat lawn like you would in a subdivision in the town.
If I can make one comment?
Mm-hmm.
I farm 250 acres, and you can go by anytime and take a look at it. It doesn't take any extra effort to be neat with 250 acres as it does with 1 acre.
No.
All it takes is pride.
Sure, but that's
all
your
it takes.
choice, and I
but
have a
that's what you
concern
would
with
want.
us telling people how they have to keep their property that they own.
It's not an excuse to have a large piece of property just to lay junk everywhere. I mean, that's not what it's for. If that's the
Junk
case,
to
you're
you
gonna be
maybe isn't
plastic
junk to
scrapyard.
someone else.
Yeah, but then in that case, you're gonna be plastic scrapyard. But I mean, that's not the intent. The intent is to be reasonable. And that's all, well, let Brian go through it and let Jeff.
Hearing from staff, I think, is the correct. Anyone else? Any other comments? Nope.
Just a vote.
Was there
Just a vote.
just a vote for the?
Yep. Yes, it was second. Oh, oh, sorry. I need Harold to sign this second. Correct, Joanne. Sorry.
I guess I'll sign it.
That way. Pass her down.
Do you have to read it?
No, he has to read it.
He has to read it?
Yes.
Okay, moved by Councillor Reiner, seconded by Councillor Yonker. Is that your? Okay. That the Director of Planning and Building be and he is hereby directed to update the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw to be equal and fair for everyone that owns property in the rural area, including residential, agricultural, commercial, and industrial properties, in order that everyone is treated equally and fairly with respect to the Clean Yard Bylaw Act, and that a report and recommendation be presented at the April 8th, 2019 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. All those in favor? Oh, with discussion. Oh, sorry, I thought we just did that. Questions? Any? Councillor Trombetta.
I'd like to see the, also, I understand Brian, but I'd like to also see the, if the comments from our bylaw officer, what has also been said to Councillor Rayner, I'd like to see him in there as well, at some point. Whatever comments can come through him as well, what things can be tightened up, I don't have an issue with that. But as long as you discuss it with Brian. Sure. Can you just read it to me one more time, Councillor Cody?
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that the Director of Planning and Building be and is hereby directed to update the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw to be equal and fair for everyone that owns property in the rural area, including residential, agricultural, commercial, and industrial properties, in order that everyone is treated equally and fairly with respect to the Clean Yard bylaw, and that a report and recommendation be presented at the April 8th, 2019 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. Mayor Bilsman.
Yeah, I know what the gist is. It was repeated, I think, 3 times, equal and fair, and it leaves the impression that our current bylaw is unequal and unfair. And so I just kind of object to the language, because if we decide ultimately not to pass this, it leaves the impression that our current bylaws are equal and unfair. That they they're subject to interpretation. So at this time, I don't know just yet if I'm going to even support this. Probably not. So
yeah,
I'll just wait till the rest of the discussion happens.
I'm concerned with commercial and industrial properties like that. It's just throwing something else in now as well, as well as rural. So, anything from anyone else? No, then we'll take a vote. Oh, Councilor Riley.
Sorry, I'm confused. So what is the recommendation? What are we actually voting on? Like, are we voting on for us to have staff report back to us, or are we actually, because it doesn't sound like that when I hear that. That sounds like we're directing staff to do that. So I just want to make sure I understand the language.
The first part of this says that the Director of Planning and Building be and is hereby directed to update the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw to be equal and fair. So this
needs to be corrected, because we're not directing them. We're requesting for them to, I guess, create a presentation.
Right. Yeah.
So if we can change that, then okay, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, the way how I heard it was that we're already sending them to do work before getting that presentation.
Well, we would have to. We can direct him to update it, but we, as a council, would still have to pass the new bylaws that he is.
I don't know. The language is still funny.
Perhaps to clarify, the resolution is to direct the Director of Planning and Building to bring back a report and recommendation with respect to updating the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw, and the rest of the wording is just to state that to make it equal and fair for everyone that owns property in the rural area, to make it distinguish that it's the part that's being addressed is for the rural area, including all properties, industrial, commercial, agriculture, residential, so that everyone's treated equally and fairly. If that understands better.
I don't normally weigh in on specific wording of directives, but maybe the word should just be more to ensure that it's fair and equal, rather than to deal with, Railsman is concerned about the fact that it may not be perceived to be fair now.
There's 2 seconds.
I need approval from the mover and seconder for that, the change, is that,
Yeah, I'm fine with it,
Yeah.
if you're fine with it.
okay. Yep. No, she didn't. Okay, we're going to do this again. So moved by Councillor Reiner, seconded by Councillor Jonker, that the Director of Planning and Building be and is hereby directed to update the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw to ensure equality and fairness for everyone that owns property in the rural area, including residential, agricultural, commercial, and industrial properties, in order that everyone is treated equally and fairly with respect to the Clean Yard bylaw, and that a report and recommendation be presented at the April 8th, 2019 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. Councillor Yonker.
At the beginning, can we say that directed to look at the bylaw to see if it needs to be cleaned up and updated?
So just change the word.
Is hereby directed to address.
To address, yeah, that's fine.
If needed.
Yeah. Well, he does need, if Jeff said he needs to. He already said he's gonna.
Okay,
Or if we need to.
we've changed, do I need to read it in, again?
Well, we got Jeff, that's. who-
Again, I do. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Are there any other changes before I read this one more time?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Keep practicing.
I forget what the subject.
Moved by Councillor Reiner, seconded by Councillor Jonker, that the Director of Planning and Building be and is hereby directed to address the 2011-89 Clean Yards bylaw to ensure equality and fairness for everyone that owns property in the rural area, including residential, agricultural, commercial, and industrial properties, in order that everyone is treated equally and fairly with respect to the Clean Yard bylaw, and that a report and recommendation be presented at the April 8th, 2019 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. We're good? Yeah. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Now you gotta finish it off. There's no confidential, we adjourn.
Okay, moving on to confidential matters. We have no confidential matters, so adjournment, I declare this meeting adjourned at 7:31.